Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Quicc Gains live stream. Today, I am joined by our esteemed guest for the week. He is an entrepreneur, a product guru, a tech guru, a farmer. Never thought those three things would go into well together, but they do, evidently. He has traveled with his family, including a baby. So babies on 18-hour flights. We can talk to him about that shortly. He studied mathematics at Wichita State University. He's founded and exited a number of businesses and is currently the CTO and co-founder of Quicc, i.e. this channel right here. So welcome, Jason Toevs. How's it going? I'll bring you on
I'm
screen.
good.
Hello.
Yeah. How are you, Dan?
I'm not too bad. How's
I, I,
things?
I can't pretend that we didn't just spend the last half hour talking before the show, but it's nice to have the introduction, and I promise not to make the show all about myself because that would be weird.
To be fair, your name is quite literally on the name, the title, and the description. So if you could ever talk about yourself, now is the day.
I would like to point out that this wasn't my idea. It was our chief marketing officer's idea. I don't know who that is,
I'm,
but
I'm saying nothing.
I'm good this morning, Dan. Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun to be able to highlight some of the things that are happening behind the scenes at Quicc, and happy to just be an open voice this morning.
Cool. So before we jump into Quicc and before we talk about what's going on now, I think it would be interesting for many people, myself included, to know where you've actually come from. So, I mean, I was actually, funny enough, reading your LinkedIn profile just in preparation for this stream, and things like I didn't even know that you were a youth pastor, for example. I didn't even know you were that heavily involved in your local church growing up or now. You've done more businesses than I thought you had done. So tell us
Yep.
a bit about that.
Yeah. So I think if we want to kind of wind back the clock, um, one of the first things that I really knew was important to me coming out of high school was that the freedom and the ability to work kind of anywhere around the world was super important. And so I wanted to make sure that I had that opportunity. And that's kind of where it transitioned from kind of the farming lifestyle that I grew up on here in Kansas, took a transition over to technology. And there's a lot in that, and we can go through that. But I really embrace kind of the digital nomadic lifestyle, the freelance lifestyle, where you can have a laptop, have an internet connection, and kind of start whatever journey you want to do with those two things. And so I knew that was pretty important to me out of high school. I went into college wanting to pursue a degree in education for mathematics. And it was about two classes into my education degree that I was like, there's no way that I could work for a school in kind of the current bureaucracy of things. I would just be so frustrated. So I thought that education would take kind of a different spin down the track, and so in every part of my life, whether it's freelance work or if it's working in a startup, education's kind of been a core value of mine, kind of along that whole journey. But that's really kind of where I started coming out of school. I have an interesting history with my mom being from Australia, and my dad being a Kansas wheat farmer. So there's a fun romantic story there, them meeting way back in the day through backpacker journals. And if you ever see me, you want to grab a beer, talk about that. I'm sure it'll come up. I'm happy to share that story. But it was a fun way to see how small the world was, but yet how separate the world was even I don't know 40, 50 years ago.
Interesting. So, and the farming is still very, very core to your life now. You actually live on a farm, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. So my wife and I, and our daughter Shiloh, we live on a house that we built just off the family farm. So we still live on the farmland out here in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And I commute into town when I work at the office. This is my home office, actually. And farming's been a huge part of my life. I swore at 14 that I would never go into farming, and yet I started doing more and more farming even as I got older, and now my cousin actually runs all the day-to-day operations on our family farm here. He does an incredible job. It's really exciting to see him kind of thrive in that. But we do work on that together. So I still help figure out a few things, kind of the transition from the hay business that my dad had before he passed away to where it is today. It's a niche farming operation. We basically supply all of the hay, the grass bales to the zoos in the area. So it's a lot of fun. We get to go do the tours of the zoos and see the elephants and the giraffes and pretty much anything that eats grass at the zoo, um, or lays in grass, I guess. So that's what our farm does. It's not kind of the corn or soybeans or wheat farming that you might expect in Kansas.
And have you ever, obviously being a product and a tech guru yourself anyway, AI and blockchain and all that lovely fun techie stuff, which I understand and a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. Have you ever had the urge to venture into the farm tech world? Or is that a little bit too close to home, quite literally, as the case may be?
No, I think it's really fascinating. The parts of farming that I'm really interested in are primarily the sustainable agriculture movement, kind of the right to repair movement. So, for those people who don't know, commercial agriculture right now, so when you think of like big tractors, big fields, big money, um, for farmers, it's actually really dominated by the banks ending up more or less owning the way that you do things, or the big seed companies owning the way that you do things because of just the cost of everything means you're very much running a line of credit with the bank all the time and just kind of revolving that through. So you go and sell your soybeans, and then you got to pay off your bank loan, and then you have to take out another loan to like go buy seed for the next year, or to buy inputs for your field. So I think that there's a much more sustainable way to do agriculture. This is, it can be as simple as cover cropping, where you put a crop in the fall, so it overwinters, and then when it dies, it actually adds nutrients back into the soil, and then you just plant your new crop into that instead of like disturbing the dirt and kind of changing the soil biology there. But I mean, I can go super deep into that. I don't know that I'll bore all of our visitors or our watchers with that, but I think that sustainability aspect is really interesting. So at a large scale, how do we create sustainable agriculture? How can technology help that? There's a lot of efficiency gains that technology can bring, and where we're primarily seeing them right now is from the big hardware ag companies. So think John Deere, think Case, International, New Holland, all these big companies that are adding GPS systems to their tractors so they drive in a straight line in the field and the farmer doesn't have to do anything. The problem is that most farmers aren't techie. And so when something breaks on one of those systems, you have to have a computer to diagnose it. Oftentimes, the software to diagnose it is not made available by the manufacturers. So you have to take it into a service center, which means, the one guy who has learned how to do it at the service center has to do it. And then there's a backlog of like, now I'm waiting several days, but I've got to harvest my crops. So there's this idea of a right to repair where when you get one of those types of machines, you should be able to, as a farmer, diagnose it yourself, have all the tools available to you. You have to go learn it still, but at least have the tools available to you, which right now, in many cases, it's not. So those are the two big things in farming I think I could get pretty excited about. But for my every day, every week, it's just a small little garden, and managing that, and kind of being able to take care of our own food production as a family, sustainably, and without harmful chemicals being put all over the place. So I do a lot of companion planting and cropping for that.
Hmm, interesting. You see, the thing I find interesting about much of what you were just saying is that your core values, and I mean, if you check out Jason's LinkedIn page, he actually talks about his core values like right there and then. So I don't need to go through them because they're all public and live. So it's all about community and, like you're saying, the right to repair. Within Quick, it's, everyone's right to be heard and have the ability to get their voice out there. So I think a lot of what you're about, from what I can see, and it'll be interesting to hear your take on this, is people having the right to, like I say, be heard, or the right to serve themselves, live the life that they want to live without necessarily constraint. Is that kind of where you come from a lot of time?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes down to, and this is something I think a lot of our audience can resonate with. It's this idea of creating something that has value, um, and maybe even arguably more value the more that people consume it, if that makes sense. So when you think about farming, there's some basic natural laws and principles that you must observe in farming, right? If you don't plant seed, you're not going to harvest any kind of crop. If you don't water the seed or take care of the seed, you're not going to harvest any kind of crop. And then your harvest is based off of more or less the love and nurturing along the way from when you plant the seed to when you harvest it. And if you don't harvest it, then it dies and it may resow itself, but it may just die and there's no real gain or value out of it. So for me, from a creative perspective, I think that being so core to the beginning stages of my life is seeing every day this idea of seasons, right? And this even goes into entrepreneurial journey and like how do you manage time as a startup? How do you manage time as a freelancer? How do you manage time within your family through different seasons and rhythms of life? And so I would think that there's a big value that I put on creation and production of something good, right? Something that has value. I mean, there's a lot of creation of kind of just garbage, or things that don't matter. And I want to be able to help people create things that do matter. So when it comes to Quick, um, seeing this idea that we can be a tool in someone's toolkit to free up time to create better content, to create content that allows them to be heard in a market that is predominantly on mute, is really encouraging. It's really exciting to me because, if I hearken this back to farming, it's almost like the ability to um, be visible in this sea of, just farmers, right? So if I want to sell my crop, if I want to distribute my crop, it's almost like being able to go to the farmers market and show like, here's what I have. It's the food on the stand, whether I'm a small farm or I'm a large farm, like this is the creation, this is the production that we are doing. um, and you get to engage with people there, right? So you have this back and forth relationship. You get to know who your customers are. You get to know the people behind the purchase, so to say. um, and you get to discover, what they care about and what they think about. And so that's what has been a lot of fun, even for us as we build product and iterate, is talking to a lot of our users, talking to a lot of our customers, and just hearing, where are we hitting the nail on the head, and maybe where are we missing, right, and hitting our thumb instead. And in those cases, how do we change, and how do we create a better tool, a better service in a sustainable way, right? Because that's one of the things I think there's a lot of. I don't know. It's probably the most interesting and unexpected part of creating Quick is, man, everybody treats you like a large company. And there's a lot of incredible parts of that, but there's also a lot of like pitfalls and downsides to that. For example, like we don't offer 24-hour support. We don't do support on the weekends, unless there's a real emergency. And a lot of that is because it's there's just a handful of us. There's less than 10 team members, and it's pretty wild to think about. serving thousands and thousands of users all around the world on a 24-hour schedule, just not sustainable for our team. So I think that that's one of the things that it's that hard rhythm that you have to like find what is the right pace for this current season, and how do you kind of walk through that so that people have something good at the end of the day.
I mean, going back slightly to what you said a few minutes ago, you were saying about deciding what crop to plant, and then you've got to prepare the ground. You've got to sow the seed. You've got to wait for it, nurture it to grow. You've got to harvest it. If you don't harvest it, it dies. Some of it may start again. Some of it may not. And I mean, from my perspective, that's it's almost like core principles.
Mhm.
And that same thing that you were talking about can be applied to social media strategy, to content creation, to nurturing of community, to organizational leadership, to all sorts of things. Even HR and employment.
Yeah.
It's I find it interesting the similarities between the two. If you can farm, you can nurture a community. If you can
Yep.
nurture a community, you can build a business. If you can build a business, you can earn an income. And all of those combined, there is no real difference really. And that's part I find interesting. I mean, my dad was a builder, and you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
And he actually taught me business without even thinking he was teaching me business, because like every day we he would sometimes pick us up from school, and we sometimes would go over to clients' houses to have him finish off jobs with us. Um, and he's just sharing time with his boys and sharing his passion with his sons, which we never really appreciated at the time. But the first thing he would say when you walk into the house is take your shoes off. So you take your shoes off before you go into someone's home and treat it with the respect
Hmm.
it deserves. Same
Hmm.
thing goes when you're a business and you bring on a client, you need to treat them with the respect they deserve, because they're putting their trust and in some cases their money in your hands, and you need to treat that with the respect it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no real difference, is there?
Yeah, it's fascinating just learning from, those who kind of came before us, right? Whether it's our parents or grandparents, and just how they respected and treated one another in a very different age before technology. Right? And this is one of the things that kind of excites me so much about technology and being a part of this rapid advancement of communication and kind of this shrinking of the world in a sense where we're now, less than. Less than a day apart in most cases if we want to travel to another country, or if we want to message somebody or hop onto a Zoom call, it's, immediate. Things that like my parents even, and certainly my grandparents just didn't have. And so there's a lot of fun to be able to look at my grandparents in Australia. They had a big sheep property, about 4,500 acres, up in the Darling Downs range. And just the way that they poured into that property, the hard work that they did, the dedication that they had, and also the vision that they had for their kids and their grandkids, from all of that. I mean, I remember hearing about kind of the first days when they picked up this property in Australia after World War II. Um, they spent 5 years literally just clearing out 4,500 acres, clearing out rabbit warrens, and taking out all the pests on the property and building fences. 5 years. Build fences, destroy rabbit warrens, like take out all the rabbits, because they cleaned it. They cleaned up the whole countryside. There was no grass. There was just nothing because there's an infestation of these pests. And they basically spent the first 5 years taking out the trash, and then they started to build off of that. And I know there were so many days where it's interesting now going back and listening and reading through some of my grandpa's old correspondences. So many days where they thought that it was, all for nothing, and what are we going to actually have at the end of this time. But I think the vision that they had for what that land could be in the future was is that driving force. And I think that having that kind of vision, whether you're in farming or tech or content creation, so important, because without that vision, there's really no. provision to get there.
Interesting. So the you literally it depends on mindset in some cases, doesn't it?
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
being an entrepreneur, I mean, I'd love to probe your mind slightly on this as well. Being an entrepreneur, there is that concept of, like you were just saying for that story, it was 5 years of taking out the trash.
Hmm.
But if you flip it, it was 5 years of preparing the foundations upon which to grow a family legacy.
Yeah.
So, depending on how you look at it,
Yeah.
that's that. Do you think that's where the entrepreneurial spark in you came from?
Yeah, I think is interesting. I didn't necessarily know where to kind of track it back or trace it back to, but I think it was a couple years ago I was thinking just back through like my dad and mom and my grandma and grandpa on my dad's side, grandma and grandpa on my mom's side. And there's something very entrepreneurial about farming. I mean, you have got to just do all the work all the time, and it's pretty cutthroat. There's weather working against you, your crops, pests, all sorts of stuff could go wrong. And you have to have thick skin, and you have to be able to just wake up and do what needs to be done. And so I really attribute a lot of that, I guess, whether it's work ethic or perception on the world, whatever you want to call it, I would attribute that to my parents especially because they showed both my brother and I growing up how important that was to just get on with a task, whether you're stuck, whether you don't know what to do next, but just move through that and keep working on it. And there's a level of having a game plan, but I think that created this entrepreneurial spirit where when we see problems, when I look at a situation, I see opportunity for it to be better or opportunity for a change. The first thing I usually do is go look for, are there current solutions that I could implement and go make this change? And if nothing exists, then it feels a lot like the winter time where my dad would always be building something out in the shop. And on our farm, because we do hay, which is predominantly a summertime harvest season, and then you're just basically letting grass grow for the rest of the year. Um, there's not a ton to do in the winter other than maintain machinery, make sure do all the farm chores, kind of the building upkeep, that kind of thing. But dad would always have these crazy ideas, and he would be building these, massive steel structures to, can we put hay bales into the back of into a semi trailer, and how do we do that, and jerry rig different things. So he was an engineer in a lot of ways. um, but it was incredible to see that, like, R&D time every year, and that we knew that it was coming, and there was, it was cold outside, but turn on the shop stove and get to welding, or get to tinkering with things and building things to try and make them better for the next season. And so I think there's a lot of see a problem, think about ways that you might want to solve that problem. Then when that time comes where you can go and build something, just keep trying stuff till you figure out what really works and what really fits. And I think that's where that entrepreneurial spirit came from. I really enjoyed those times and those moments with dad out in the shop just building and tinkering with stuff.
I remember those with my dad as well. They were, to be fair, he enjoys even taking my son outside, and just they were making a bird box the other day. It's like,
Yep. Yeah.
okay, just Samuel said, I want to build something, and my dad said Lego, and he goes, no, Lego's boring. Don't know why he said Lego was boring, but apparently Lego was boring on that day. And he was like, do you want to build a bird box? And Samuel was like, oh, okay. So it's him like,
Yeah.
yeah, hammer and nails at the age of
Yeah.
4. Terrifies the hell out of me.
Does your dad have the old fashioned like drills where it's just like the hand crank where you have to push down on it and you crank, crank, crank,
Do
crank,
you know what?
crank?
He has an entire shed full of old tools. I mean, he's got the new modern tools. He only retired a few years ago. But his dad was a cobbler. So he learned a lot of his
Ah,
craft
okay.
from his dad. Um, and his dad, I believe he had polio, he got a club foot. It was, he was, he's had health problems basically. So mobility was a bit of an issue for him. But as a cobbler, he had all the old proper, old school cobbler gear, which even back then was old for him. And all of that gear is still in my dad's workshop. Every now
Wow.
and again, he will still, like if they, he's
Cobble some shoes together?
not so much cobble, but he will fix. Yeah, he would. If his soul's got a problem with it or anything, he'll think, "Do I take it down the shop?" No, that's fine, and he'll just go into the shed and he'll just fix it himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
it's just that what he's like.
Well, and it's really interesting to me. I mean, even just seeing from when I was a kid to now, and just the way that the world has changed, everything from like Amazon to um, basically being able to have stuff on your doorstep in like 2 days. I mean, that is insane. I remember telling my dad and my mom both when that was kind of first the thing. They were like, No, like there's no way," and it just would blow them away how quickly you could get stuff, especially to a farm. And it was funny because my dad would go over and farm in South Australia with some friends that he had met over there on some of his trips. And so, like, farm here in Kansas, our big harvest season was June, July, maybe into August a little bit. And he would go over usually November, right before Christmas, and we'd meet up and see my grandparents at Christmas time all together. But it was one of the most incredible things to see. He would go and like brag to his friends in South Australia that he could get stuff shipped to his house super fast with Amazon. And I don't know, I spent almost every day, you know, fixing his phone or ordering him something on Amazon so that he wasn't stuck in the workshop because he didn't have a part or something. But it was a lot of fun. And I think this idea of like being able to repair things versus just buy stuff new has just, I mean, I even see it in my own life. I don't repair nearly as much stuff because I can get it in a day or two and it's probably half the cost of what it would cost me to repair it. Plus, I would have to spend the time to repair it. So a lot has changed.
Yeah,
Farms are very different these days.
for sure. So let's dig into product a little bit. So I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is the really the driving force behind entrepreneurship in general. It's see a problem, create a solution to the problem, get that solution to the person who's got the problem.
Hmm.
That's basically what entrepreneurs do.
Yep.
So, what's the process that you would suggest or recommend that people watching this would go through if they've got a business, with COVID-19
Hmm.
and all the well, it's not fun, all the craziness that's been going on recently. There's a lot of people who are doing really well. We heard from Mike, the Quicc CEO, last week. So, if you want to check out the episode, go and listen to Mike. He talks a lot about entrepreneurship and the journey of Quicc and his journey from HR into co-founding the business with you. And something that Mike brought up was really interesting about how Quicc has gone through 10 to 15 times kind of accelerated growth just in the first few weeks of coronavirus alone, of lockdown.
Hmm.
So that was a challenge. And we can dig into support and a few other things shortly. Um, but from a product point of view, how would you suggest people pivot or change or alter their current proposition? Because there's this growing trend of thought that actually there's a lot of people who've been waiting for normality to return, when actually a greater number of people are now thinking normality isn't going to return. We have to kind of figure out or build a new normal.
Yeah.
So what's your views on that?
Well, I will say that in general, chaos in any kind of system is an entrepreneur's friend, right? So when you look at COVID, you can see that, there's a lot of things that are happening because our lives have just changed and they're changed a lot drastically. I think one of the things that we heard from some of the investors that we were talking to and just have like ongoing relationships with um, was that home decor startups had just shot through the roof. and valuation and revenue and stuff because like everybody's like, oh, I've got to have my home office and I've got to like make it pretty in the background. I got to hang a hat up on the wall and yeah, yeah, your studio has changed a lot. Thank you, Amazon. Um, but I think that there's this perception that when everything is kind of going sideways or there's uncertainty in life, that it's not the time to take risk. And the first thing I think everybody needs to really wrestle with is, you know, it's kind of cool and fun to start a business in today's modern era or day and age. Like it's kind of to be honest, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a privilege to be able to start a business and operate a business that you run. Um, and I think that you have to ask yourself, do you want to have that pressure, and can you absorb that pressure and operate a business well? One of the things I've actually found out working with Mike and being partners and founders together is I am very happy and excited in many ways to be um, a co-founder and not like the CEO of a company because there's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with, and you just kind of get all the last end pieces and all the tough decisions to make. And I have a lot of respect for Mike and how he handles a lot of those things. And I've learned a lot of patience from him through that process. But I would say, as you're looking at entrepreneurship, know who you are. Having a good self awareness is so, so vital and important. Um, and you don't always have to be, captain of a ship. I think oftentimes if you're looking at entrepreneurship and it's kind of your first jump in or your first foray into it, I learned the most when I was working alongside other entrepreneurs and watching how they built and grew their own companies before doing some of my own stuff. Now, fortunately, I was pretty young when a lot of that happened, and so I got to start a new thing, and I learned what I needed to learn there, and then do the next thing and do the next thing. And I think the hard reality that all entrepreneurs will tell you is that, man, you don't get it right most of the time, actually. There's a lot of mistakes you make, and so you got to be ready to fall on your face, be able to pick up the pieces and keep going. You've got to be able to um, be honest and kind when you do make a mistake and it affects other people's lives. Um, and I mean, I think that when you look at the entrepreneurial journey and you see how you can start something small and you're kind of building all the pieces, you're talking to the users directly, and then maybe you start bringing a few more people in and you get a little bit more disconnected from the user journey or the story of the product. My cat has decided to join me. Um, this is Minnie. Hi, everybody. Hi. So I think that it's super important to know yourself and to know kind of what your limits are, where your frustrations are going to pop up, because man, entrepreneurship, you have to have thick skin. It's a long journey. It's a very rewarding one, but it's one that takes a toll on you. So being able to create a sustainable rhythm for how that works and how that impacts your life, I think is so important. I've done it the wrong way where we didn't have a sustainable rhythm, and my relationship with those closest to me really suffered. Um, but thankfully, I have an incredible wife, and she was able to like help me process and work through what would work for us and as a couple. And then as we build a family, what are some of the core values that we have for that? You just want to walk on my keyboard, don't you? I know,
Keyboard cat.
keyboard cat. She needs to do some captions today, so.
Yes, for anyone watching, just so you know, no felines were harmed during the making of this live stream, but we do entirely rely upon feline labor for captioning, not artificial intelligence or machine learning or Amazon Web Services or dedicated server hosting or any of the code bases that we use. It's none of
Yeah,
that stuff. It's a
yeah,
room full of kittens
yep.
tapping like this.
Tap tap tap. CC actually stands for cat captions. If people haven't heard that yet.
Exactly. There you go. And labor's cheap. What can I say?
Yeah, bring them good food. They're happy.
Yes, and they
Belly
are
rubs.
loyal. I would say they're loyal to who feeds them.
That's right.
Yeah.
She was acting a little bit needy this morning. I think she wanted a egg.
Oh,
Spoiled cats.
I know.
Spoiled cats.
We treat them well. So
So yeah, I think that that's kind of how I think about people when they're looking at jumping into entrepreneurship or even continuing entrepreneurship. Number one, I think build a community of encouragement around yourself and listen to that feedback. I mean, there's some things that I am just not good at naturally, and that Micah is incredible. And that kind of teamwork, I think, really um, fosters better products in the sense that the product has a more robust impact on people because there's trust with the brand, there's transparency with the way that you do things, make decisions. And even if you have a great engineering team, without kind of that leadership behind just great engineering, it's very difficult to handle um, kind of snap decision making. So like when COVID all hit, there was definitely a time where as a leadership team, we all decided, and Dan, you were part of this, we all decided that, it's really time to just wait for a little bit and see what the impact of all of this is going to mean. I mean, we saw our numbers going through the roof, we saw a lot more usage, a lot more support needs, but also at the same time, there was an opportunity there where people could now communicate and foster a way of communication online that could reach so many more people. So taking a
funny
time to
enough,
pause is okay.
I was I should say I think how to articulate this. I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day, and they're a local business to where I am. Obviously, I'm in the UK, in case you hadn't guessed from my accent. Those who don't know me, and it was a really interesting conversation because they've a big fan of art, and I was saying about the entrepreneurial journey and taking the baggage with you from the years leading up until this point, and that doesn't necessarily serve you moving forward. It doesn't allow you to be a better leader. It doesn't allow you to kind of unashamedly be yourself and build community as yourself. You kind of almost have to put this. There's always this kind of desire to put a front on, like a fake persona in front of you.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, but they were a bit of an art geek, and they said, "Well, so it's kind of like Michelangelo David." And I was like, "Is it? I don't know. Is it?" Um, and apparently, I think that's what they're saying. It was Michelangelo when asked about where he got the inspiration for David. He said he just chipped away at the marble at everything that wasn't David,
Yep.
and he just removed everything that wasn't the statue within. And I was like, so what they took from that conversation, how it concluded was they said to me, well, so really, I'm just going to chip away all the things that aren't me and all the things that don't come naturally to me, and I'll run with what's authentic, what is actually me. I was like, yeah, it
Yeah.
was a really
Yep.
deep conversation. But that is the entrepreneurial journey, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, I know we've got one of the questions here in the comments that is asking
I was
about
just about to get to that. Hmm.
entrepreneurs born or made. Um, Man, I've got mixed feelings on that question because I think that um, there is a natural ability in some of the best entrepreneurs that I've met or seen that I think you're absolutely born with. I don't think that you I don't think that you can't be an entrepreneur if you're not born with that ability, if that makes sense. So I like to refer to it a lot as like an athlete, for example. If you want to go be LeBron, right, and play to that level, there is a lot of dedication, blood, sweat, and tears to achieve that kind of entrepreneurial um, gain or value, right? Oh, one of my favorite, I nerd out about this a little bit too much maybe, is if you look at Elon Musk, for example, and the way that he's changing the world, in so many ways, there is so much risk that he's taken on. There's so much that he's had to endure. And in a lot of ways, it's cost him core parts of his life that people might not realize that's cost him. I think he's been married what 3 times now, and he's got 5, 6 kids. And I mean, if the guy's sleeping on the factory floor to make sure that they transform the way that um, we transition from fossil fuels to a more renewable, more sustainable mode of transportation, I mean, there is a sacrifice there that changes a generation, um, but doesn't go without personal cost. And so I think a lot of it is understanding, as you want to look at entrepreneurship, and if you're born with the talent or if you're not born with the talent, to what degree do you want to work to arm yourself with the skills and the tools to be a good entrepreneur, right? And a lot of that is understanding risk and the amount of risk that you're willing to take on. And so if you're naturally afraid of risk, or if you're naturally very fearful of what is coming tomorrow, there's a lot of work that you have to do to overcome that to be able to make the decisions that put risk on the line, because entrepreneurship is just managing risk and taking much bigger risks than a lot of other companies or organizations would take.
And a lot of this is also understanding your faults or and your positive and your negative traits that you're born with.
Yeah,
Um, and there's
self-awareness at the end of the day. I mean, it's just
yeah,
know who you are, and what you're good at, what you enjoy doing. Because if you don't enjoy building companies and watching four of them fail and one of them succeed, kind of, and then maybe set you up for one that really does succeed based off all the lessons you've learned for the last decade, entrepreneurship's not going to be fun. It
but
just
there's
isn't.
also many ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, it's
Obviously,
true.
not the Quick's caption cats. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah. We don't want to move.
we don't want to do that. But funny enough, my niece is she's in a band. Bless her. Which I bless her. She's 15 now. She's soon to be 16, and it's terrifying. But she has natural rhythm. So rhythmically, she is naturally full of rhythm. So yeah,
Hmm.
dancing comes naturally to her. She's pretty much dancing as a baby, singing the same thing. But then even she would say that she couldn't teach me rhythm, but she can teach me timing.
Yep.
So there's many different ways. Even if you're not entrepreneurially minded, there's many ways you can still get that same outcome. But you need to be aware of where you're coming from, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be honest. Am I going to go throw down with LeBron anytime soon? No. Can I go to a local gym and maybe play some pickup ball? Sure. And so I think that if I wanted to go work really hard, play basketball all the time, that's all I wanted to do. Um, I can get better, get better, get better, and over time, if my body supports it, um, I might get there. But the reality is that, do I want to spend all that time? For me, it's wouldn't be enjoyable, but for others, so much so. And I think that this is where, as we live in a world now with just this massive conversation happening around diversity, I think that there's a huge part of the problem that we're not talking about, which is so many of us trying to fit into a mold of other people instead of embracing our own uniqueness, our own talents, our own gifts that we've had from day one, and bring that diversity of individuality to the world. And hopefully that's what we're helping foster with Quicc, being able to help others from all around the world now. I think what 109 countries was the last number I remember. Um, Once you get over 100, you kind of just stop counting. But um, no, it's to see people use a tool to talk about who they are and talk about what they love to do, talk about things that they see happening in their own local sphere of influence, and then seeing the impact of that is incredible. And so to help foster that creativity, to foster that voice in an individual is something we're really passionate about as we think about all the decisions that we make. And that's what we want to keep focusing on for our users, to make a product that can last a long, long time instead of something that's a flash in the pan and kind of gone tomorrow.
We've got let's get another question from Landon actually. What are your thoughts on the quote or parable about hunting field mice versus hunting antelope when it comes to startup techs and entrepreneurship? I've got to admit, I've never heard that one myself. Maybe that's a Wichita thing. Um,
Yeah, I think I've heard something similar. And Landon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is probably talking about, are you going after the small game, or if you are you going after kind of the big fish of the sea? So yeah, it's when you're building products. So from my perspective, my passion in entrepreneurship is understanding problems within communities or groups or organizations, building problems, or sorry, not building problems, building products that help address and solve those problems in a very short time frame, and then learn from the feedback from that group and continue to iterate moving forward. So it's not necessarily perfect right out of the box or even on take two or three, but it gets better over time. And having it faster is more valuable than waiting several years to get something down the track. So when I look at things like this, there's two pieces to this equation, I think, on a personal level that you have to understand. One is, do you want to impact the masses, or do you want to impact an influential group of people that then in turn impact the masses? So for us, I would actually say our approach with Quicc is probably more so hunting antelope than hunting mice. And that may not be intuitive for most people right out of the gate, because they might be thinking of themselves as an individual creator that uses Quicc, maybe a small agency that uses Quicc to caption content. But the reality is, are every one of those people are actually um, influencing a much larger group, right? So if you think about it in the sense that mice are like kind of almost like a consumer product. So think of like a Facebook or a Twitter. Like, you want millions and millions and millions of users, whereas Antelope might be more so you're impacting a very specific group of people that then influence others from that standpoint. So for us, it was important to build a product that other people could use to drive value for their communities. And that's why, I like being in kind of the tool building space, because every time Quick is used on behalf of impacting a wider audience, so in this case, adding captions to video content, a message can be heard in a multiple, instead of just, all right, we added a new customer, so one new customer gets experience this product. When we add a new creator to Quick and they put captions on their video content, it goes out to 100 or 100,000 people seeing that piece of content. They're all then impacted by the benefit of having captions on that video. So that's how I like to build product and look at ideas to fix, is helping foster a wider spread impact of um, the benefit, I guess, uh, more than anything else. So
and
antelope for me.
and with the funny, just keeping on that track for a second, the the creator's time in creating that content and getting that content captioned in order to maximize their views and then getting that content out into the world. How many hours do you think? I haven't actually looked myself at the stats. How many hours do you think we've actually saved creators in that whole process?
Oh man, that involves a database query, Dan. Golly, um, I would
Well, you're a tech
say,
guru. You can do it one-handed, surely.
yeah,
Get
I would
captions out to do
say
it.
at this point we're probably we're over 2.5 million minutes of time that we've saved creators all around the world. I would say, based off of our current usage, we're probably closing in on 2.7 million minutes worth of content created, or time saved for content creators around the world, which is really incredible, because that's 2.7 million minutes that our creators have recaptured, um, instead of editing kind of the traditional way that you had to before Quick, that they can now deploy in however they want, right? This is, spending time with family. This is creating more content, maybe doing a passion project that they couldn't do before, but now they have time to do it. Or maybe it's simply just saving money from outsourcing, um, that to kind of a more expensive place to have those captions done. and they can use some of their team members to build out some, better content to spend more time creating a richer, more beautiful experience for their audience. And I think those are all ways that we've seen creators kind of recapture and reuse this time. Um, but at the end of the day, you know, you can't make more time, right? And so every moment that you have to be more efficient in a process, that is something that we want to help with, especially when it comes to that video creation. And so we've got some exciting product things that we're demoing even internally, exploring how they might work to see, will this save even in our own process of creating this video content and finding the pieces that we need and leveraging them in ways that we want to on social media. Are there ways that we can streamline that for others? And it kind of becomes the product that you need yourself is a product that has value for other people. It's just, are there enough of those people, and do they really want it for us to go and make it a real product in the real world?
And this isn't, well, this live stream is not all about us selling quick, obviously, but I think it would be interesting for some people to really understand where the change in efficiency comes from. Because right now, I mean, if anyone's given Quick a try, then they'll quite quickly see you literally record your content, upload it, you know, set whatever font, size, type, color, whatever that you want, and then burn those captions into the content. So it's quite easy. But what's the workflow that people used to do, or in some cases still do, before they discover tools like Quick? What is the longer form workflow? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I think that self-reflection is sometimes difficult when you want to like be brutal about efficiency within a business. That was one of the things I wasn't great at out of the gate, and I had to really learn how to look at the own processes that I was doing and say, how can we streamline these? So the two main use cases that I've seen as I talk to all of our creators is um, one, there's just a straight outsourcing of it. So whether you're outsourcing somebody else to do your transcription, whether you're outsourcing somebody to actually go and edit the video for you and give you a finalized product, that's great. And if you've got the money to spend on that, fantastic. The the issues that we've seen even with that process is when you are editing somebody else's content, right? So Dan, if I'm editing a video that you shoot, I don't know what you said, right? Because I wasn't the person who said it. I'm consuming it for the first time. So there's a big loss of efficiency in the sense that I've got to go and listen really hard to make sure that I get everything down that you said exactly how you said it. And then maybe there's some things that you said that I'm not quite sure about. So I have to ask, like, hey, how do you spell so and so's name? Because I don't know them. Is it Shelby with a Y or Shelby with an IE? What does that look like? So there's a loss of efficiency if the creator is not the one actually captioning the content. Um, and transcribing that piece of content. And so what we wanted to do is say, hey, we know that if we can get something that is pretty close, it's really just those nuanced words that we need people to fix and finish. And then as soon as a creator has gone through that and said, yes, this is all good, this looks good, I'm ready to post that, that's a process that they would have to do whether they outsourced it or they did it themselves, right? That final check, right? So there's this efficiency flow of like if you're the person transcribing it and doing kind of that final check all in one, all of a sudden like you're ready to go to market. You're ready to post that piece of content faster than you would if you were waiting for somebody to outsource it, as well as the whole argument of I am completely out of control once I hand it off for somebody else to do it for me. So that's kind of that's the workflow that we've seen that I think is really hard to be honest about as a creator and as you're producing content is, well, I've got this process of just sending it out to a team or having them do it, and I just kind of get complacent with that. But if you really are honest and look at all the time that's going into that, there's a lot of time wasted. versus doing it yourself and just having a little bit to edit or finish off. So the second use case would be using more specialty software. So if you think about the video editing software out there in the world today that can do all of the things, but you really only use it for like five things, right? And it's usually a high learning curve to get familiar with that and to be able to do it. And then the steps of adding captions into those workflows, it wasn't designed for that. It was kind of a tack on add thing. Whereas we want to be better and better and better about focusing solely on how do we capture that transcript for a video and let the user do the least amount of work possible to get to a final transcript with the fonts and the colors and the style that they want, hard encoded onto the videos so that everybody can see it all the time and hear that message, right? Whether it's displayed in an area where the volume is on mute by default, whether somebody's deaf or hard of hearing, whether you want to communicate brand colors and other nuances, even with texting and emojis and all of these like visual cues that we use today in all of our media. It's fascinating how much the supporting text has in terms of learning information or consuming information in a way to make an action or to make a decision based off of that information. Um, so I think that that's where, when I look at the two time savings, it's either are you outsourcing and now you're out of control, you're waiting for somebody else to deliver it on their timeline, or do you want to be able to remove this complicated video editing process? Maybe you don't even know how to do it, and you don't necessarily need to go through learning all of that. We want to make that a really short and simple process if you're just adding captions to that piece of content.
And I can actually, to be fair, I can attest to that because I think I tried it in, it was either Final Cut or Premiere, one of the two, and I could get captions in to the video, the actual editor, but it would only actually display them in basic black and white.
Hmm.
And in order to actually display or change different colors or whatever, that I had to buy a third-party plugin, which if I remember rightly, there was a few of them, anywhere between $40 to $140 to do the styling. I could only do it on my Mac. Yeah, and that would be slow depending on the length of the video. So yeah, I mean, Quicc was much easier to use. So literally just uploaded it, changed some text. I had to change, I think LinkedIn I was talking about at the time, and
Yeah,
it would actually try and sorry, it would caption LinkedIn as linked space in.
yeah,
So I just did like a find all for linked space in, copy paste LinkedIn as it should be. That's the only edits I had to make, and then like click burning. That's about
yep,
it.
yep,
As far as product definition, sorry, product creation and you know implementation goes, it's actually pretty slick.
yeah.
You know,
Well, and
so when
we know that there's a whole slew of different use cases and ways that people say, yes, I would use this. I would use Quick for this, or no, I wouldn't use Quick for. Like, we're trying to get better at all the different edge cases. One of the things we've seen with all the COVID happening is longer form content is becoming much, much more demanded. So one of the new features that we just pushed actually a couple of weeks ago is the ability to save kind of where you're at in editing a transcript. When we initially conceptualized it, it's like short form video content. You're in, you're out, you're kind of done within one session. And so we knew that a save button could be valuable, but it was just another thing to build and add and kind of manage on the back end side. So we just kind of put it lower on the priority list. And then with a lot more of this long form content being uploaded to Quick, it's like you can't you can, but you don't want to go through, an hour-long piece of content, just caption, 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 and not be able to save it, or at least kind of where you're at within that text editing process. So, yeah, I mean, there's little things that we're learning and kind of juggling of like, as a small team, again, it's like, what do we build now that balances value for creator immediately and value for our business so we can be around long term sustainability and finding that kind of teeter totter, because sometimes those don't always align, and sometimes we have to do some work on the back end with our development time to make sure that we're here next year, right? And if we build all these cool fun features in and we're not here next year, then it doesn't matter. So there's man, it's a teeter totter balancing act.
Mhm.
It's a lot of
Feast or
fun,
famine.
but yeah, at the same time, it's something that it's hard to communicate, because oftentimes our users don't see what we see every day in the office, or see from a code perspective. So um, I try and always be transparent about that, and open if people have questions of like, why aren't you doing this, or why are you doing this way? Um, Try and give them as much information as I can without spoiling all the secrets.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, it's just it's communication. Just talk more, ask questions, and we're here to answer.
And speaking about secrets, just before we start to wrap up, what is coming? What is the secret little hints? We can't talk about all of them, obviously. I know that, but can we give a little bit of a hint as to what may be looming?
Yeah. So it's something that's it's kind of like the worst kept secret of our product roadmap right now. Um, and we've been talking about it for a while. And I think some people who have, maybe heard this 2 or 3 times now are like, oh, like, yeah, that's the secret. Yeah, whatever. But the reason that we talk about it and we try and get feedback from it is because these are things that we build internally and use and test before we push it out as a product to people, and getting feedback of like, yes, that's really useful for me. Here's exactly how I would use it, and this is kind of how I'd expect it to work is super valuable. Um, but we've been doing some work, especially prototyping out how and when is the best use for searching through all of your video content. So if you are a creator who's creating a lot of pieces of content, if you're creating long form content, oftentimes you're also repurposing that content out into the world, whether that's I've got a thing that I want to put out on LinkedIn, but I also have, something in that same video that's a little bit later in the video I want to push out to Facebook. So how can I speed up that process of finding the clip, c- pulling that clip out by itself, and then reposting it out? So as we continue to build our partnerships um, with our API and some of our distribution partners that we'll be able to announce soon, this will be probably coming to that layer first, as well as kind of the quick website. And then we'll start to roll it out into other areas. But it's, this idea of searching through your transcript, right? If you've transcribed everything, you've done all the hard work to make this a really valuable data asset for you as a content creator. So you can find a specific phrase that you said, you can search for a company that you mentioned. You can, there's even ways to show that, hey, I am talking about your brand, this is how many times, and these are the videos, and these are all the clips, and then all of a sudden you can say, oh, by the way, if you want them, like, I can just crop them out and send them to you, and it's just click a button, grab all those clips, and then be able to publish them out wherever you want. So the idea of searchability of content, the data value that resides within the transcript is now you should be able to find all your content and distribute it in a way that is the most effective for your brand or your business. And this isn't like a YouTube search that is based off of like keywords and titles and descriptions, kind of the SEO. Like, I don't actually know what I'm going to get because the search algorithm's so mysterious. This is something that is built for a creator who needs to go through their own library of content and say, I'm looking for this. I need to find every time it happened. Or I'm looking for something like this. Can you show me things like this? So there's a very specific searchability, and there's also a fuzzy searchability where you can kind of find ideas or topics and trends, and that's something we'll get better at over time. Um, and then to be able to reuse that in a way that best fits your creation.
So that would be the machine learning side of things.
Yeah, yeah. So the machine learning comes in, especially as we're getting more and more nuanced of like, let's say, for example, I'm searching for shoes. right? Let's say I'm a runner vlogger, and I want to search for shoes. Well, shoes is something I might say a lot or talk a lot about in product reviews or whatever. But maybe specifically if it doesn't just look for the word shoes, but it also can associate shoes with the brands of shoes. So like New Balance and Nike and Adidas. So it might say, oh, well, we know shoes are kind of tied to these other things. So we'll show those as well, just in case like you need to talk about, I might say, hey, these Nike Air Max or whatever shoes, basketball shoes, I know, but um, they're terrible running shoes. But I might not actually say the word shoes. So I say Nike Air Max are like the worst for running. Well, they're shoes. I'm still talking about shoes, but I need to know that Nike Air Max relates to a shoe product. So that's where we get a little bit fuzzier over time, a little bit better at finding some of those nuance. We won't start there. Obviously, that's kind of the hard stuff to do. Um, but being able to find specific phrases or words within your video content, um, maybe even jumping to speakers, for example, um, those would be things that we do early on.
So as we start to wrap up a little bit, what are the parting words of wisdom that you would share with people, whether they are growing their businesses and trying to keep up, or whether they're trying to pivot and struggling? What would you pass on to them?
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing that helps me when I'm really struggling to find some level of creativity or to continue kind of pushing through a specific problem or task that I'm working on is to more or less remove myself completely from that environment, and to just spend a little bit of time doing something that I might not have done for a while. A great example of this is, this balance between tech and farming, right? When I go and garden and I go and do some of the stuff on the farm, it's very different than what I do from an entrepreneurial technology business side of things, whether it's managing people or writing code. Like there's a lot different um, than doing any of that kind of stuff. So I would say just take take a break, take some time, find the rhythm that helps you spark a little bit of creativity again, and don't beat yourself up for this mentality of work, 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 work all the time, because you're only you're only going to be efficient in your work if you are excited and inspired about what you're doing. Now, don't get me wrong. There's days that you got to show up and you just got to harvest the field, right? There's days you got to show up and just water your plants, and sometimes that's just gross and it's long and it sucks, and it's just part of the journey. But knowing that, hey, if I get this done today, this is the impact it can have tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after. So when I get really frustrated or really just stuck on something, that's kind of what I look to and remind myself of the vision that we have kind of as our family vision and my own personal vision of where we want to go and what that looks like in terms of creating and building things and why that's important to us.
Words of wisdom indeed. So, any questions that everyone's got for Jason, leave them in the comments. Give this video a like, subscribe if you feel you got some value, because we've got new episodes coming every week. We've got special guests from external to Quicc coming up. Everything from Facebook experts, YouTube experts, SEO experts, copywriting experts. I think I've got a couple of Pinterest experts on the
Ooh,
horizons.
sweet.
Basically every social media platform you can think of, people who specialize in mindset and confidence, all sorts of stuff we've got coming up in the coming weeks. This is a weekly show, so subscribe and you can get notified of when that new content is going live, and we will see you there. But Jason, thank you very much. Been a
Thank you,
pleasure as
Dan.
always.
All right. We'll see you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.